I'm standing around in the garden because I have some spring jobs to do, and they involve all this sort of bits of trees, because although it's not spring yet, it's a very good time. The frosts have just gone away temporarily, but it's a very good time to do things like pruning. I have 2 apple trees and I've never pruned them. So they're giving fruit the last few years, but they're getting very straggly looking. So I've kind of looked up when and how to prune them, and before spring growth is a good time. So it's not quite spring, it's the middle of January, but I've started doing that, and I had to be a bit brave about it, because you're not supposed to give apple trees what you call a haircut, apparently. So you have to go sort of 2/3 of the way down the stem to avoid this getting little hairy regrowths of little tiny branches and not strong branches, you know. So I've done that much, and that's what all that is from. I've done my 2 apple trees. I've also done a tree here that is a bog willow, and that's just, you can see it runs along the wall there. It's really just for a bit of cover in the garden. I'll show you what it looks like from next door, so you can see how it functions as kind of a natural wall, because I try and keep the garden natural. I have a what you call a rewilded garden, that it's got a lot of wild elements in it that are kind of semi-controlled but not completely controlled to oblivion, and then a few features that aren't, you know, naturally occurring things, but that I think go well with other features, like a couple of I suppose they're larches with formal looking trees, you know, that are sort of dwarf trees, because I live in a little bungalow, cottage kind of a style thing. So I don't want big huge trees, but I do want trees like that kind of a bog willow or sally willow, because they send out tuberous roots, and in very wet winters, and I'm in Ireland, in very wet winters, the ground gets very sodden, and I have very uneven grass in my garden. And there's an area here, I have a natural path going up to the house as well, that's not paved, and that area there near the door gets flooded in the winter. So I have, you know, that's a gorse bush and another willow there, because the tuberous roots go right across the garden and sop up some of that wet and stop you getting a kind of swimming pool look. Now the rest of things don't look great at the moment, because I have big leaf plants here which haven't come into their own because it's not spring yet, but they look nice when they do. So I've managed to retain a decent cover of grass over the winter, and the whole garden hasn't turned into a swimming pool. So even though a lot of things, like all my heathers and everything, well, some of them are in full bloom, but I've still got a lot of old leaves and things like that to get rid of in the garden for spring. They provided a little bit of cover in the winter for things, but it's a bit wet today to do that particular job. But I use those for mulch. Pick them out on a dry day before the spring growth starts coming in, and then use them for mulching other areas, like in that little shrub bed there. But today it's going to be all about trees. And then the other thing it's about, sorry if you're feeling seasick, I just want to show you, I have some of my tools out there. You see, this tool I will be using, this is part of a set of 3 Japanese style saws, and I'm using that for trimming trees. And this I'll need as well, because over here I have an example of something I'm transplanting, and I had to wait till the frost went away to do this, but before the new growth comes on. That's a raspberry bush, and I get loads of raspberries every year because they self-seed in the garden, but not always in a good place. This is right beside the path, and it's a pain in the neck to cut grass around it and all that. So I want to dig that up and transplant it. And I will put it like along a wall somewhere where it's still easy to pick. But, you know, I'll get a place in the wall that gets a bit of light in there somewhere maybe. Gets a bit of light, but is still easy to get at to pick the raspberries. You can't see a lot of them at the moment, but some of them have self-seeded along here. So any of the ones I fall over regularly, I'm going to get rid of them as well. And then I mightn't get all of that done today, but the other job is moving all this brush, because you're going to have a place for it. And I'll move it all into the back garden, and I'll show you what the plan is in the back garden. See, here's how it looks from the other side. It's nice and neatened up now, but there'll still be loads of cover, you see, when all the spring growth comes on. So it's a natural wall. So that pruning activity went on in the autumn as well, because I have a pile of brush here as well from this tree, which was getting very high and very, very scraggly. It was originally just a kind of a bush style thing. Now the birds like it high, but it's too scraggly now, and is sort of flopping over and just looking very bitty. So I've cut a lot of it out already, and that's this stuff here. So the question is, well, what do you do with all that brush? And I really thought this out, because although I chopped this up and I used some of it for twigs for starting fires and everything, because I use a stove style fire. Another good use of it, I think, is for corners like this under where I feed the birds. I have started stacking it up there because that's kind of in out of the way of things and near the boundary wall of the back garden. And I have noticed, look at the little holes down here, that has to be rats. I reckon that's rats. You're always near rats, you see. And they tell you to put in piles of wood and things like that for insects and things, because they like it. But obviously rats are going to really like it as well. And particularly if it's under a tree that there's seed falling from all the time, because I'm feeding the birds, aren't I? So I am going to go ahead and put more in there, because all the local cats, I find them all sitting out here every morning. I used to think they were bird watching, but these days they're obviously rat watching, and I haven't seen the rats yet, but occasionally they'll manage to kill one. So they're keeping the numbers down for me. And I'm going to keep stacking that dead wood and cuttings and everything from the grass over here, because that sort of built up, it's a built up kind of compost heap made up of cuttings of all sorts of things. And those branches were only there temporarily, because I don't usually put branches in it, but I had my new plan in place for what I'm going to do with the branches. So this compost heap is too tall now. It's made a little hill, and I don't want to go any higher with that little hill. I don't mind having a few interesting weird bits in my garden. I've built a winter complex for my 2 frogs that remained at the end of the summer, and I just have cover over that one because I don't want animals falling in. But they've got a multi-level weird thing going on with a little hill beside it and everything. I don't mind that little bit of scruffy looking. Obviously the grass has been left very long for the winter and everything as well. There will be more tidying up when grass starts recovering. But from autumn onwards, all these bushes in the background and everything, they were getting pruned back, you see, so that I didn't have their blackberry bushes. I didn't have blackberry bushes growing out into the whole garden, because everything wants to grow. So I've loads of cuttings like this, and I'm going to get in there and trim all of that right down as well. I'm not going to bring the tree completely down, but trim it down to not too far off, maybe a foot higher than where the little bird feeder is, and it'll look a lot neater, but I'll have a lot of debris. So the debris is going to go in there over where those rat holes are, and hopefully I won't meet any rats. I'm going to I have been letting those branches dry out because I want to make a little fence in the front of it which will look quite cute but will also keep all the debris in. And back here there is a kind of a path under the tree around to the outer boundary, but there's a lot of space in there for throwing debris in. So that's going to be my new debris area that everything rots down in. And there'll be a little fence on front of it. So it's a kind of a boundary, slightly in front of the boundary I already have in the garden, but it'll look nice and natural and have a kind of rustic fence kind of thing in it. And then any time I want any bits of dry wood or anything, I can get them from there, but it'll keep rotting down, you see. So that's a good plan. But the only thing is, it's still, the ground is very wet and everything. So I'm going to go in and put my wellies on to do this, because if you are walking in and out of an area like that in winter, this is why people don't like doing jobs before spring has really sprung. You can get very mucky. But I mean, obviously it's the perfect time to do it, because even on this tree, which gets leaves all year round, it's not totally covered in leaves. So I can see the shapes of the branches and the shape of the thing I want to prune back to get at it. So this is an ideal time to do it, the minute it stops being too cold to do any work, you see. A little bit every day. So we'll see how far I get today. Hopefully I will get some of those cut down with my Japanese saw at the very least. And, you know, if I don't get much done, that's okay. Tomorrow's another day. And this will be the first thing to flower. It's trying to flower already. It's a pink rhododendron. So that'll be a bit of colour in the spring. All the roses are trimmed down already, so that just doesn't go all straggly as well. I just keep it contained, fairly small. It's a wild rose. And here's the reason I get nervous about pruning things back. You can hear my washing machine rinsing there, doing the washing, because it's the first dry day in a while. I trimmed that. That was a buddleia. And I trimmed it back, and I had read online that you could trim them fairly aggressively and be okay with it. But I killed it off completely. It hasn't grown for the last couple of years, and it was beautiful. It was really high, so it's quite upsetting, because buddleia, butterfly, love them, and they look really beautiful and smell beautiful, beautiful vanilla smell. So I've had to plant other slips. Luckily it grows very easily from slips, so I've planted other slips in the same place and other places while I was at it. So I have to start growing it again. It'll grow really quick though. So that was a shame, but that's why I get nervous about pruning things, but you have to. Here's the other thing I'm looking forward to seeing spring with, because that's my Japanese acer, which is getting bigger now. I don't really prune that, but I can see buds starting on it. Spring wants to happen, you know, soon. And some potted trees. This oak tree is still in winter mode, but it'll recover. And then things like this dwarf willow are nearly ready for spring. That's why the pruning has to all happen now.